Yay! Hello, Lori. Thanks for being here with us today. I'm so happy to have you join the Leaders Lounge broadcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you are so welcome. You're so welcome. Good morning, everybody in the lounge and watching anywhere else on our YouTube channel or on our other Facebook page. Today is our Leaders Lounge broadcast, and we have my good pal, Lori Taylor from Scottsdale, Arizona, joining us today. And Lori and I actually are, just like my guest last time, our common thread. Actually, we've discovered there's a ton, but one of our things that did bring us together was our past. We were both involved in the National Outdoor Leadership School, and it's been decades for me since I was on that thing, but it's still such a huge part of my life, and it was for Lori's too. So, Lori, how about you? How long ago for your NOLS experience?
So mine was in 2013. So it's not been quite a decade,
yeah.
But yes, I was definitely the oldest on my trip.
Very cool. Oh my God. I'm so proud of you. That's so awesome. Good for you. Good for you. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's an adventure. And good morning, Josh. Glad you could join us. And for those of you who are joining us this morning, we have again Lori Taylor here from Arizona. And she is a wilderness guide. She is an online educational teacher. She helps leaders as they go through, transitional phases in their lives. And it's kind of one of those interesting universe jokes that the universe is playing on her now, because she's in transition herself. So she gets to live her own work, which is, it's a double-edged sword sometimes, right, Lori?
It's true. It's true.
Yeah. So we're happy to have her here and dive right in. It sounds like you guys can hear us okay, because Josh already chimed in. Thank you, Josh, for letting us know. And if you are catching us on the replay, again, this is Lori Taylor for the Leaders Lounge. And Lori, why don't you start with just telling us, when you say, about helping leaders transition those transitions, what does that mean exactly?
Well, when I was in a time of transition for myself, I discovered I needed to learn more about it. I wanted to lead myself through it well, because I knew that how I was experiencing it was not being effective. I was downward spiraling instead of finding myself grow in the middle of this in-between time. So what I mean by transitions is where you've left something behind, maybe by circumstance, maybe by choice, maybe by something going on globally. There's all the reasons why we end up leaving something behind, but you don't yet know what's next. It's not like you just start a new job. It's that space in between two seasons. And so that in between space is that it's very uncomfortable. There's actually a term for it. It's called liminality. And that in between the two things is where a lot of things happen. And so that's the transition, and we can manage it well, or we can, spiral in the middle of it and find ourselves diminishing. And so that's what I mean by a transition, is in between two things.
Yeah, I love that. Life in liminality is actually the work that Lori does. And it's kind of nice to have a name attached to that time, because it just feels like chaos. If I had to put a name on it, that's what it feels like sometimes, is that chaos. But I'm in transition as well. For those of you who know, my husband and I and our family, we're moving to Bend, Oregon. And so I can feel that same California, our time here ending. Time hasn't really begun in Bend yet. So we're kind of in that liminality state of not know. At least we do know where we're going, but it's still that change is happening. We don't have everything figured out yet. And it's been exciting, at least, thank God, right? Like that's been my perspective on this particular thing. So that's been fortunate, because sometimes it's not exciting. Sometimes it's very scary and daunting and all those other things that we see. So I'm lucky this time. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll all go through them, whether we want to or not. Many people experience it when they go to college. They're not living at home. They're not kids anymore, but they're not yet fully adults, and they're trying to figure out what that looks like and who they're going to be in the middle of it. Don't know what the job is going to be when they get out of college. So we have a familiarity with it, even if we're not in it right now. But
Mm,
everyone goes through this throughout their lives. And a lot of businesses go through this. A lot of
mm,
jobs go through this where you know that something's ending, an era or a way of doing things, and you're having to figure out what to do next and how to rethink it. And in the in between, a lot of important work is done to reveal about ourselves. And it's been a fun journey for me. And I've gone through multiple experiences of liminal times, and each time I've had new discoveries, new insights, things about myself, and then things that are actually very universally applied to people. That, if we can all do this better, I think we'll find that our liminal times are really valuable, and we would, instead of try and run from them and hurry to the other side, we
mm.
will really find something true about them that we appreciate.
I love that, right? I love it because you're right. We all logically know that change is going to happen. There's nothing, that's the nature of life. We're not meant to stand still. We're not meant to be the same year after year after year, and neither is the world. So anything in nature for that matter. So we're going to have those times. So if we can have something in our kind of toolkit to navigate them a bit better, I mean, might as well take it for put that positive spin on it, right? Get something out of it, glean something out of the experience rather than it being a slog that you have to just go through, you
Absolutely.
know? Nice. So, what would you say is one of the things that you found is universal that helps people navigate these times?
Well, for sure, when something ends, and even if something is beginning right away and there's not a lot of space in between, those endings all stir a sense of loss for us.
Mm,
And sometimes that loss is, we're glad for it. There's relief, there's a sense of really ready to move forward, but still there's loss. And
yeah.
it's easy to get caught in that loss sometimes, and even memorialize what was,
Mm,
and feel like we always look back and think, oh, those were the good old days.
yeah.
Because the forward motion is hard and it's unstable, or we feel insecure in it, or we're not quite sure what it looks like. And we can not have mourned our losses well and moved on. And so we sort of drag them with us. And I feel like that part of the toolbox for me, of being able to say this is ending, and I want to give it the honor that it's due. I
Mm,
want to value what it was for me. I also want to be able to put it in a place where I can say that's no longer me. That's no
mm,
longer a part of my life. And it's just like mourning the loss of a person. At some point, we've got to be able to figure out what life looks like without that now. And if we don't mourn that loss well, it becomes debilitating. So mourning is a posture that we can take in that in between time, so that we can move forward with some strength and truth, and honoring what was, but not letting it drag us backwards all the time.
yeah, I think that's the tough piece for sure, right? I think universally just this past 6 months, everyone's got a taste of that. I don't think anyone escaped this pandemic. That alone has thrown businesses and lives upside down. Like you said, more, it's no longer, if you're doing business the same way you were last year, you're not going to make it,
Right.
right? It's a whole new thing. So while you wish it was, I mean, I feel the same way sometimes. It's like, God, I wish I just figured it all out. Not figured it all out, but I just had some forward, momentum, and now I've got to reevaluate everything. Um, so if you don't shift and to start looking forward instead of wishing backward, you're gonna be in a little bit of a pickle, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, it takes so much emotional energy. If we're not
Mm,
intentional about it, it rises up whether we want it to or not.
yeah.
We can say, oh, it's fine. We'll just move forward. But if we haven't taken the time to really bring some closure to what went before, then it comes out in places that we don't expect, and in moments of frustration and anger, disappointment. And so an author that really influenced me in this is William Bridges, and he writes about managing transition, specifically in the business world. And
Okay.
it influenced me a lot because he was talking about as a leader of other people, especially even if you come in sort of a new position and you're taking over a management role, if we don't recognize that the people that we're working with are facing loss with who was in that role before, or what the business looked like before, if we don't acknowledge those losses, then we are expecting people to embrace change, and we're not leading them well through it. We are going to keep facing some resistance or frustration or emotions that maybe even those people don't understand.
Right.
If we haven't addressed their losses. And so this idea of going through transitional times is not just to manage ourselves and our losses, but to really acknowledge that in a moment of change when we're managing people, they are also facing losses. And it doesn't mean that we let them wallow in that or stay there. It actually means that we help them process that well and be intentional about it. So loss is a universal part of it. It just doesn't have to be as debilitating as sometimes we let it. If we don't address it, it's even more debilitating.
That's so interesting how, when you kind of brought that change down to a more granular level of what we deal with in the everyday, right? Whether it's a change of, like you said, leadership, or a loss of a process that you happen to love. I mean, it can be something like that. So you don't until you said that, you don't really realize how many times you're going through transitions that, and that's a good thing in a way. Guess what, guys? You're actually really good at it because you're going through it a lot more than you think, right? So you are able, you do have the skills to do that. It's just sometimes when it's higher stakes or very personalized, it can be a little bit more challenging, for sure, right? Because then we're in it. We're in it for sure. So yeah, thank you for bringing that down to especially the people in our audience, because that's really where their heads are at, right? How can this help me lead better? And I think that's what you were getting at there.
Absolutely.
So you had mentioned that at the tail end of your what you were saying there about that the if you don't mourn the loss, if you will, right, then it can actually be more debilitating. What would you say to someone who is, for instance, starting a new role and they have to, go in there and shape the team up maybe, or whatever needs to happen? How would they go about that? Because sometimes people are really nervous about acknowledging that person that was, because they don't want to be, maybe that person was amazing and they don't want to remind the team that that person's no longer, sometimes it's real touchy and people aren't sure how to go about doing that.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so much of leadership is about taking the temperature of the culture that you're leading, and what are they capable of, and what do they need going forward. And I think if you're a confident leader, if you know what you're bringing, I have found for me that it touches on our own sometimes insecurities about stepping into a new role or walking into new change. We have to be willing to honor what came before and see its value, not to say that we want to keep it in the same way that it was, but if we can say that was valuable, what can we break down from that to say this needs to continue, and what can we say, and this is where we're going to change? So looking at a past leadership role, for example, or looking at the way things were, I think it's very important to give some space for conversation to happen where you can deconstruct what was a little bit, not to get rid of it, but to say what was really good about that. And what about that can we carry into a creative way of looking at it applied in the future? And so you're still seeing it as valuable, but you're also not letting it stay the same. You're reapplying it. You're reestablishing its place in a new world. You can do that with the way a leader did things. What did you love about that leader? I just had the opportunity to go back to a role that I was in North Carolina, and the organization has a new director. And so I had been the old guard. I had been with the
Right.
business director for years. But I was glad to have the opportunity to sit with the new director because I'm just sort of in an outsider role. I just come in as a guide for occasional trips. And so as an outsider, I could say a few things that maybe those that he's working directly with couldn't say. But an important part of the conversation we had was, I want you to know what that former director was loved for.
Mm.
Because if you completely go a different direction, you will find resistance because the people that are working here, they were working for him because he did this really well. And it doesn't mean
Right.
you have to become that. You just have to acknowledge that that's one thing those people have lost.
Mm.
And so maybe you do embody that a little more than what might come naturally, just to help them transition to
Right.
following you as a leader. But I think just acknowledging their loss to say that was important. And I know that you loved him and you were here because of what he was good at. I want you to also know that you will be safe here with me. There's that emotional safety people have to
Sure.
feel when they're following a new leader. And if a leader just ignores what was, then they don't feel safe to the people who are walking through a previous leader to a new one. So just a way
Yeah.
to look at it is just acknowledging that this is present, this sense of loss and change. And like I said, William Bridges, if you want to
Mm.
look up that author, he writes, his classic book is called Managing Transitions.
Okay.
He's also redone this book multiple times and explored the subject on all levels. So I would say look up William Bridges, and he's got some materials that are fantastic for business leaders walking their business through change.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think because really what struck me too is that when you were talking about honoring that leader, like if you were the new person, right? Um, a lot of that, oops, let's take that one off. Sorry, guys. A lot of that comes down to when you're first encountering these people is what I was getting out of that too was listening. Just
Mhm.
listen to them, right? Start there asking the questions and listening to the response, right?
Yeah.
And that's my big encouragement when someone's starting something new is it's definitely in the simple not easy category because what I advise is to meet with every single person, right? And I've done it both ways where I've had them actually fill out a survey and I ask these questions. What's working well? What are you challenged by? I don't ask like 20 questions, just 4 or 5, but I always is, what do you love about your job? What are you challenged by? What are your suggestions? Those few there, so you can kind of get a sense of, like you said, what they love because their guard is up right now.
Yeah.
They're nervous. This is an uncertain time, and we've all. If you forgot what uncertainty feels like, just remember the past 6 months, right? Walking into the store and not knowing if there was going to be toilet paper. Oh no, right?
Right.
That uncertainty of new leader, everyone's gonna kind of be a little bit on guard. Of course, we all are until that person shows that who they are, right, and
Yeah.
that they're there for the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Absolutely.
cool, very cool. I would love to know if when you think of yourself now and all the work that you've done, and when you look back and you think of your younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself, knowing everything that you know now, back in the younger days? What would you really advise yourself on?
Mm. I was in such a hurry when I was in college and right out of college in those early days. I thought that I should change the world in a few years. I thought that I was going to have things figured out in a few years. And I think that kind of time pressure on myself, it walked me into a lot of self-imposed disappointment. And instead of slowing down and realizing that um, leadership development takes years, even personal and internal development takes years. Figuring out who I want to be and who I'm going to be is not going to happen right away. I think if I had allowed myself a little more space for that process to take longer, I wouldn't have lived with so much self-doubt and self-disappointment.
Mm,
And I think that's an important thing that I've found when I've talked with younger leaders and they're frustrated that they don't have the plan or the plan is not working.
yeah.
To be able to say, slow down, you're moving as fast as you need to move to prepare yourself for what is coming. If you try and shortcut the process of development, then you may find yourself in a position that you're not ready for. It may be the ultimate dream position, but you
Mm,
may not be prepared to take it on because you rushed it. So that's slowing down. Even now, as I'm in another transition, I've set aside the business I was running. I'm not teaching at the moment. I have to continually still tell myself, slow down, don't be in a
mhm.
hurry through this time, because what needs to happen will happen in terms of my personal development. And sometimes it's not always about me being ready. It's about whatever organization or leadership role is out there that's for me. Maybe that thing is not yet ready for me. And if
Yeah.
I rush it, the timing will be off. And so, man, that the timing is an important piece to consider as we're working towards our goals. Not to work too quickly and cut it off, not to lose our drive, though, not to lose
Right.
motivation in the midst of that slowing down a little bit. So it's a balance.
Yep.
But I think that I err on the side of moving too fast. And so for me, I needed to say, slow down and let things develop in their right timing. The right thing at the wrong time is the wrong thing. And so we don't want to force it. Um, yeah, an
Yeah.
important thing for me.
Huge, I think, huge. And I can completely relate. Each year, this has only been the past couple years since I started my own business, but um, sometimes I actually figure this out in hindsight, and sometimes it's proactive. But I have a yearly theme, and my theme this year is less is more, because I finally realized, and maybe it's a lesson I'll need to learn again. But like you said, I need to slow down, and instead of trying to do a smattering of things, okay, let me just do one thing at a time and do that really well, and not only do it well, but enjoy it for what it is. And I know that can sound cliche sometimes of, yes, am I the girl sipping my morning coffee and just being all, warm and fuzzy about it? But sometimes, yes, like that is part of my joy, I guess you could say. And what it is, what I think too, is that's, I find joy in that. So that works for me, right? It may not work for everybody. It has to be your thing. So if slowing down and just kind of allowing things to happen and going with the flow, it might be new for some people, but if it works, if you find that you're frustrated, like you said, a lot of people find that they're frustrated and they're wondering why things aren't working. Well, don't keep doing that same thing. Try a new approach, right? It might be scary to try that new approach, but you might get a different result. The only way you're going to know that is if you just give it a shot.
Yeah, I relate so many things to being on a wilderness trek. It's part of my blood and it's part of my career as well. So
Right.
but that made me think of how often we're on a trail, and maybe a long trail, and it may be boring at the time, and we may want things to hurry up and get to the destination. We want to figure out what that summit experience is going to be. And I have found that as a guide, I am often slowing the group down to enjoy the journey
Mm,
to that summit, because there's a lot of really amazing things that happen along the way. There's a lot of little tiny side trails that go to a view as well. And I'm listening for that rushing water as we're walking by, because there might be a waterfall that we can stop and get in and play in. And if we are so driven to that end destination and not slowing down and enjoying a few side trails every once in a while, we might be missing incredible experiences along the way that become just as important in our memories of that trip as getting to the destination itself. And you're right, this isn't for everybody. Some people are much more driven by the task and the goal.
mhm.
And so I don't want to discount that as a way of accomplishing things. It's an important, we need those people in our lives that keep us moving along, because
Right.
those of us like me who might spend way too long at the waterfall and not actually make any progress.
Right, right.
But I think that it's good to, all of us can be balancing that, can be either bringing people around us that slow us down if we're the moving forward type, or if we're the slowing down type and we slow down too much, to have people in our lives that are continually saying, okay, this has been fun, this is nice, beautiful, take our pictures, let's move on.
Yeah.
I need
Yep.
this kind of person. So, but those side trails are sometimes, they're easy to miss, and they're especially
Yeah.
easy to miss if we're in a hurry, but they could be the things that we're actually meant to be learning along the way.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great analogy. It really is. And it just, you can't, no one wants to rush to the end of life, right? And because you'll just, that's not what the whole thing's about. So, yeah, I love that analogy. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Um, so we're getting close, you guys. So any questions or comments, please throw them in the chat. We've got Josh, me too. So he agreed with something on that thing, Josh. So I'm glad that resonated. And anyone else, please throw a question in the chat, and we're happy to answer that either while we're on or later on if you guys are catching us on the replay as well. So, Lori, if as we're wrapping up here, if you could give someone kind of like if they are starting to sense that they're either frustrated or they are moving too fast, or that they just feel like things are, that they are in the midst of the transition and they don't know what to do. What's like the first step or an easy thing that people can kind of take home with them today to use to their advantage?
Well, I've developed for myself and in my writing and teaching a few postures that are really valuable to take. And there's way too many to go over them in the next few minutes, but I would say
Right.
the one to start with is the posture of hospitality. And
Hmm.
that word means a lot to me. We typically, save it for a particular, role in society, that is people that are having, or they're hosting either in their home, or they're running a business that is letting
Sure.
people come and stay and sleep. But that taking a personal posture of hospitality is to say, whatever comes along today in this moment, whether it's an unexpected interaction with a stranger, or if it's an opportunity that I never had planned for, wasn't looking for, if that comes along, I'm going to walk through that door for the moment. I'm just going to give it some space and see what it might mean. And it might mean nothing, but it might also
Hmm.
be just a moment of encouragement that you never asked for and didn't even know you needed until you were open to it. And that posture, I think, helps us walk into an in-between space, a season, with an openness that maybe we find ourselves going down a path we never expected. Maybe our plan was one thing, but being
Yeah.
hospitable to what comes along actually gives us the ability to shift in a way we
Mm.
wouldn't have been open to before. And in between spaces are all about shifting. And if we have a posture of hospitality, we're much less likely to resist that. And if things are being taken from us, then hospitality also lets things leave. They can
Yeah.
come in and they can leave. And I think that sets us up for a lot more success within ourselves, and even managing our own emotions in this process.
Mm.
And it also creates space for amazing events to happen that, had we not been hospitable to them, we would have missed them. So that's a good place to start, is just with the posture of hospitality.
I love that. I love that because for all of you listening in at home, that's something completely within your control. You
Mhm.
have 100% control of your choice. How do you want to face this thing? How do you want to react to it, if you will? Right. So whatever X is, what Lori is telling you and what I encourage you to is, yeah, take that hospitable approach. take that perspective because it's probably happening anyway. So you might as well, be the person that welcomes it in, or be the person that wishes it well as it goes, and allow things to come and go into your life. I love that. That's that perception choice,
Yes.
right? That's that choice of how am I going to look at this thing? And sometimes it is an obstacle, right? Sometimes it is a big challenge. It's in the way. There's no around it. There's no over it. There's no under it. But often the obstacle is the way, right? That's the way you need to go,
Yeah.
right?
I
Great
love it.
book. Great book. I'm reading it right now by Ryan Holiday. It's absolutely fantastic. And it's super empowering because it's the same theory that you just talked about, having that choice of perception.
Yeah.
Love that. So where can people find you and learn more about this? Because it's so intriguing. And I love the liminality word. I love that there's an actual name for that time. Because for some reason, it seems less scary when there's like a name for it.
No, it's so true. If we can put language to what we're facing, what we're feeling, it gives us some sense of agency in it. They can find me. We've got a Facebook page. So just on Facebook, if you go Facebook's /Life in Liminality, right at the top, pinned to the top of that page is a list of all the postures and some important questions you can be asking yourself as you're facing that particular posture, or if you're wanting to engage that posture through liminal space. So that's awesome. That's a start. And there's also resources posted there. And then we have regular online conversations that right now we're going back through each of the postures one at a time, and they can participate in those conversations. I also encourage people to just look up this word.
Right.
Because there is a lot out there online. And, you also have to be discerning on what you find on Google. It's not all relevant. But this is a term that's been around for a very long time, especially in anthropological studies, in psychological studies. And then, of course, there's things about it in business studies as well. So don't just listen to what I have to say. I would say search this out. It's a very valuable exercise to just really know yourself and know the value of liminal times.
I love that. I love that. And I think, I don't know about you if you feel this way too, but I feel like people right now really want to learn more about themselves. They're really curious. And I'm not sure if that's a COVID thing or what, but I don't know. Maybe it is, but it's nice. I'm finding more and more people, that have that same kind of desire, if you will, to do that, to learn more about themselves, to find out. So, because everyone's going through loss, you guys. I mean, think of how you can help someone today, right? You've got your children are going through the loss of their normal lives. I mean, they're just totally turned upside down. So they've lost normal school, all that kind of stuff. Your coworkers, everyone is feeling that right now. So think of how you can be the hospitable one. Think of how you can help them through. And I guarantee you that you will also help your own self when you take that approach, right? It's just, it's the extra bonus, the benefit of the benefit, whatever you want to call it. So, well, thank you so much, Lori. It was fantastic being with you today. And thank you for joining our group here at the Leaders Lounge. We have the replay next week. And actually, just so you guys know, September 1st, we actually won't have a Leaders Lounge that day. I may pop on, but I will literally be in a moving truck. So we'll regroup after that. But we will have the replay next week for everyone. And you can definitely find Lori out there as well with the reference that we have up on the page. So, thank you, Lori.
Thank you. It's been fun. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. We are so glad that you took us up on it. So thank you. All right. Bye, everybody.